lives on Main Street on Wall Street. We've become doctors, coaches, lawyers, teachers, engineers, architects, and even Grammy-winning musicians like Mike Reed. By Joe's example, he has forwarded the torch of Make an Impact. He and his wife have invested their money and their time to causes from Special Olympics to Dance Marathon, Penn State's Catholic Campus Ministry. That example has produced student-athlete graduates like Bill Spohr, a wide receiver in the late 1980s and early 90s. He and his wife now spend his time away from his job at Goldman Sachs, building schools in Uganda, all at his own expense. He's brought people to the United States to attend college. They return home to be an example to others back home and make an impact. The examples of philanthropy at Penn State are all around. From the football team's Lift for Life, to Dance Marathon, to Special Olympics, and so many more, Penn State students each year raise millions of dollars to help others and to forward the idea of Make an Impact. As we prepare to leave here today, we must continue to celebrate the life of Joe Paterno. Among the things he accomplished in his life, it was the games he won that counted the least. It was as a son to his parents, a husband to his wife, a father to his children, an uncle, a brother-in-law, and when what often seemed to be his crowning achievement in his life, as a grandfather to 17 grandchildren. But it went beyond that. He became a father, a coach, a mentor to countless others. Young men came from around this country, from different races, different creeds, socioeconomic backgrounds, and came to play football for him, but also to learn about life. His impact reached to men who worked for him, to Penn State students, to people he never met. One mourner told me Wednesday, he said, "You know, your family's not very good at math." He said, "Your father has millions of children and grandchildren." His impact reached not only the young men he coached, the players that came here to Penn State came here because here was Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream. Here was a place where black kids and white kids could hold hands in a huddle, where we would all be given a chance, an equal chance, where they would be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin, nor the way in which they prayed to their God. Bound by a common cause, our differences would melt away. Whether it was the Middle East or Northern Ireland or Sudan, when the world would get crazy, Joe would say to me, if we could just get them all in the locker room before a game and get them in a huddle to hold hands for a common cause. At Penn State, our plain blue and white uniforms, white helmets, black shoes, and nameless school jerseys spoke volumes about his philosophy of sport and life. The simplistic beauty of the basics, core values of honesty, loyalty, integrity, family, and commitment to personal excellence. Perhaps his truest moment, his living testimony to all that he has stood for, came in the last months of his life. Faced with obstacles and changes that would have left a lesser man bitter, he showed his truest spirit and his truest self. Despite all that had happened to him, he never wavered in his belief, in his dream of Penn State. He told me he wanted to use his remaining time on earth to see Penn State continue to thrive. He never spoke ill and never wanted anyone to feel badly for him. On his 85th birthday, with all of his children, their spouses, and his grandchildren around him, he stressed how blessed his life had been. He saw the truest gifts of his life. He had his family and a very meaningful book of heartfelt letters from former players in front of him. But time waits for no man. When my father was first diagnosed, I found time to see him every day. The day before he broke his pelvis, we walked through Sunset Park behind our house. He was tired, and it was cold. But he wanted to go on a little farther. The sun was out. And as we talked and walked, I watched our shadows as they moved with us across the grass and the twigs and some remaining leaves. I couldn't help but notice the similarity in gait, in posture, and in stride. I knew the challenge it would be to walk a path in life like his, to do and expect more from life than just taking care of oneself, to be an example to my children, to teach them about the way my father and his father had lived their lives. Through the last night and early morning of my father's life, I got one final lesson from him. Sitting and watching him sleep, I started to think about him in ways I hadn't thought about in years. I thought about him helping me fly a kite in Cape Cod, playing monster with us, jumping in the waves of the Jersey Shore. I thought about him in the audience as I sang as the Admiral Joseph Porter in an elementary school production of the HMS Pinafore. Memories flooded back of even the smallest moments of my childhood. Early Sunday morning, which was to be our last together, I was seeing the father and son relationship from the eyes of my children and realized what I had to do for my children as their father. I heard the long ago early morning hum of the film projector as I remembered playing with my cars on the floor of his den. Here I was in an early morning, 36 or 37 years later, in a room alone with him once more. He had no more advice to give. But all I wanted was for one more word. From him, one more lesson. Just to hear his voice. He has given so much to my family, our university, our football program, our country, and the world. To ask for more here in the last hours of his life would have been selfish on my part. Yet here, without saying a word, his presence alone gave me one last lesson. The smallest acts of a father, a coach, a mentor can echo across decades and retain meaning for a man who would be a father to his own children. It was the tennis great and humanitarian Arthur Ashe who once said, when asked about his daughter and asked about being a father, he said, "I love my wife, but I am crazy about my daughter. I know that my father was crazy about his children, and indeed all the children he has coached or reached over the years." Over the past 17 years, I have stood in a locker room with him after games hundreds of times. Into those moments walked dozens of Saturday gladiators. The smell of sweat in the air, the grass and blood stains on the uniform, the scratches on the plain helmets. In the air, the sorrow if we've lost, and under Joe Paterno, far more often, the joy of a win. Joe Paterno would offer some words about the game we just played. Most often a reminder that you're never as good as you think you are when you win, and you're never as bad as you were when you think you were when you lost. All those guys that played for him can still hear that. For 45 years, he led this program. He always ended his post-game remarks with the same thing. He would say, "Let's thank the good Lord," and we would kneel down, hold hands, and say the Lord's Prayer. One time, just out of curiosity, I said, "Dad, why? Why that prayer?" He said, "The words, Jay, the words. Our Father, give us this day our daily bread.